I was paid to be invisible until the numbers on a bankruptcy packet began to scream in a language I could not ignore. And with a single post-it noting a $17 million discrepancy that should never have existed, I watched a man the city called untouchable fold at the knees and understand that invisibility can end the moment someone chooses to be seen. The world outside still dozed in its gray half-light when I guided my complaining cart across the marble of Atlantic Plaza's 23rd floor, the wall clock insisting it was 6:43 a.m., while the fluorescent tubes above added a bruised pallor to everything they touched, including the face that looked back at me from the dark ribbon of the window. I tightened my grip on the master key, not because the building was cold, but because fear has a way of nesting in the tendons when rent is due. A 12-year-old's birthday is looming with no party in sight, and a 2004 Corolla threatens every morning to give up the business of starting. Gold letters on a heavy door announced Richard Vaughn, CEO, and as the lock turned with the practiced click of routine, I stepped into the soft, curated perfume of mahogany, cologne, and money, where my body remembered its choreography. Liners out, baskets in, glass cleared of fingerprints, chairs set to the angle that says, "Someone important recently sat here," while my mind wandered to Ella's note about overdue school supplies and the kind of arithmetic that is done not on spreadsheets, but in the pit of the stomach. It should have been another anonymous passage through an office designed to erase the people who wipe it clean, yet a thick folder lay open on the desk with its pages scattered in a way that made the space feel suddenly human, as if a hand had hesitated and lost its nerve. And the title that ran like a siren across the first page, Declaration of Bankruptcy, pulled me closer with the rude magnetism of a cliff's edge. I told myself to look away because curiosity has never been a benefit in my job description, and because men whose names are etched in brass do not thank women in gray polos for reading what is not addressed to them. But the columns and totals on that page tugged at the same instinct that has balanced grocery ledgers at kitchen tables, and has never forgiven the numbers that once killed my father's business. I began to add, silently at first, and then with the whisper of a voice I hardly recognized, the 12s and 8s and 15s that marched down the creditor list. And after the second pass and then a third, the total in my head refused to move beyond 47, which meant the 64 stamped on the front was not an error in ink but an intention. I felt the old ache of a memory that still knew the shape of a foreclosure notice, and I took out my cracked phone with hands that would not stop trembling, photographing every page as quickly as I dared so that, if the truth was about to be buried, there would at least be a map to where it lay. A pad of yellow paper sat beside a fountain pen that had probably signed more than a few lives into and out of fortune, and on the top square I wrote, with as steady a script as fear allowed, that the total on page 7 added to 47 million rather than 64, that someone had inflated the figure, and that he should verify the math before signing anything that could not be unsigned. I did not sign my name, only a friend, because it felt truer than janitor or cleaner or ghost. I reassembled the stack so precisely that a ruler would not have found me, slid from the office as if the carpet had turned to water, and clocked out into a basement that smelled like metal and last night's heat, where I told my legs to take me home and found they had decided to root instead. At 7:56 a.m., a black Mercedes floated into the garage like a verdict, and a man stepped out who looked less like a captain of anything than a person who had not slept, whose shirt had lost the argument with the night, whose eyes were rimmed the color of surrender. He clutched a leather briefcase to his chest with the tenderness of someone carrying ashes and moved toward the elevator with the gait of a defendant who already knows the sentence, while I hid behind a concrete column and rehearsed the rational thing, leave, forget, survive, until my phone vibrated in my hand and an unfamiliar voice asked if I was still in the building and, when I said that I was, told me not to leave because he needed to see me now. Footfalls hurried down the ramp, uneven and human in a way I had never imagined they could be, and when Richard Vaughn came into view, he did not look angry so much as unmade, with tears brightening and refusing to fall, a small yellow square quivering between his fingers like proof of life. He asked whether I had written the note in a voice that turned the garage into a chapel, and when I nodded, bracing for the summons of security, for words like trespass and termination, he sank to his knees on the oil-stained concrete in a suit worth more than my car, and cried the kind of tears that do not ask permission. He said I had saved his life, and perhaps I had saved everything else as well. And then, swallowing the last of the shock, he explained in a rush that the phantom $17 million had been inserted by his partner, Austin Monroe, to force a bankruptcy that would allow him to buy the firm for pennies he already had counted, and that he himself had been minutes from signing away an empire that could not be rebuilt once the ink dried. He told me he had checked the access logs and found only my badge before 8, and that the absence of a name on the note meant more to him than any stamped credential because it suggested motive without price. Then he asked me to come upstairs because Austin would arrive in 10 minutes, and because he intended to confront the fraud with the original documents, the photographs on my phone, and a witness who had nothing to gain except the simple rightness of not looking away. I wanted to run, because survival is a habit that does not break easily, but I thought of Ella's birthday and my father's ledger, and the way a life shrinks when you choose safety over truth. So I stepped into the elevator beside a billionaire whose hands still shook, and watched our reflections float up the glass, as if two very different people had been placed briefly on the same piece of time. He told me not to be afraid, and to say only what I knew, and when the doors opened, the morning sun laid a clear path across the mahogany where fate had been waiting for signatures. At 8:27, the intercom announced that Mr. Monroe had arrived, and Richard looked at me with a steadiness that felt like a pact, then told the secretary to send him in. And I understood, with a clarity I will never forget, that invisibility ends not when the world finally sees you, but when you decide to be seen.